when you're building agents, is it actually like the model? Not necessarily. It's actually what goes inside the model's context. If you don't know something, you can literally ask it. What can I do? Can you help me do this and that? The topic today is like all the stuff you heard about online. And we're just gonna deep dive into like just explaining each of them in a way that you can understand.
Everybody should be able to benefit from AI tooling. But unfortunately, that's not the case. Whether it's a steep learning curve or the intimidation of learning a new technology, a lot of people aren't able to reap the benefits of AI tooling. I wanted to start this channel to help fix that, to disseminate knowledge, teach people about tools, level people up, but a lot of my episodes get a little too technical. So on episode 54 of Tool Use, brought to you by ToolHive, I brought on one of the best educators I know, Hai Nghiem. He's a builder, an investor, one of the co-founders of AI Ventures Canada, and we're going to talk about AI tooling fundamentals. We'll cover things like context engineering, MCP, Claude Code, different types of agents. And we're going to try to do it in a way to allow you to start integrating these tools into your life. We're going to cover a bit more of the basics, still get a little bit technical, but I think it's going to be a lot more approachable. So I hope you enjoy this episode with Hai Nghiem.
I think the term context engineering came about when either Andrew Kaparthi tweeted about this or the folks at Cognition put out an article or a blog about how when building agents, it's actually context engineering, they coined the term context engineering, that is more important than anything else. So when I read that, I'm like, okay, so when you're building agents, is it actually like the model? Not necessarily. It's actually what goes inside the model's context. And then Harrison Chase from LangChain also chimed in, and he was like, hey, like you can build agents a certain way, you know, blah, blah, blah. So the argument between the two was actually between building I think sequential agents versus like parallel agents, and then there are certain tasks that are better for agents that are running together, and then there are tasks that are better for agents that run after one another. But in both cases, it's the context that is shared between the agents that is the most important. So that's where the conversation started, at least from my understanding. And then people who are more on the I guess like the mainstream side of things. So like Toby from Shopify tweeted about this, and he was like, "Context engineering is so much better term than prompt engineering." Da da da. And then I think the conversation kind of like shifted towards something that's more mainstream. But it came from like basically people building agents and realized that hey, like all the stuff that you do, like figuring out what to put into the agent's prompt and messages history, that's context engineering. Is it like the relevant information, or is it like the date and time of the day? The user's like personal preferences, etc.
I feel like it's not really anything different. It's still just managing what you give to the LLM. It's just kind of changing, or it's evolving with how our use of these tools are evolving. Because before, a lot of it was chat, so you just go back and forth. But now they're incorporating function calling, tool use, all of these peripheral systems that pull in data, RAG systems, and all of that. It's really just evolved into a more all-encompassing, make sure you understand what goes in, because a few people have quoted it, garbage in, garbage out. So you want to make sure that you're not just saying, okay, dump this entire log file into it and just have it processed, when you can do some pre-processing ahead of time, try to make it a little bit cleaner, extract the important bits. Do you think that actually, let's take it back one step. So agents, there's a lot of people talking about like what the different definitions are. And then there's the third argument being like, it doesn't really matter. It's just LLMs with tools. How do you view an agent? Because we're going to dive into a few different avenues that agents can take here, but like the base level, chatbot versus agent, how do you differentiate?
Yeah, so the topic today is like all the stuff you heard about online, and we're just gonna deep dive into like just explaining each of them in a way that you can understand. So there's agents, and then what I like to do is like to look at them at different types of products and tools as agentic stuff. So is it an agentic workflow, or is it an agentic like loop? So for example, a lot of applications doesn't have to be agents. So agents is like a very like open-ended kind of like tool where it's like you are given these tools, do what you can given the task. But a workflow is more like you will always go through these 5 steps, and each step could be an LLM call, which means that there's more control that you can have over each of the steps in terms of like output quality and stuff like that. So an agent is more like, like a person. If you give it a vague task, hopefully an agent can solve it. If you know that your result is always going to be the same, you expect a certain type of result, then you should go with their workflow. So an agent is like a person, at least to me. Like it's very open-ended. It's not like a workflow. If you build something that you always expect a certain type of output, it's probably not an agent.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. That's a good differentiator because I find both pipelines and agents could have like API calls, try to interact with different types of data. But yeah, it's just a very predictable progress from like A, B, C, D through a pipeline. And like you said, you can have LM calls at every step along the way to kind of take a fuzzy input and make it more standardized or pull in extra data, manipulate in some way. If someone's like, I have a task and it kind of falls between these two, there's not a clear delineation as to what it is. Should people try to just create a mental model of it being a pipeline to improve the likelihood of success, or should they do an agent to have it be more exploratory?
I think people should look at it from the perspective of whether or not you're trying to replace a whole job function or just a responsibility of a job. So, for example, if you're, let's say, if you're trying to replace somebody who's in the back office processing passports, you could try to replicate different workflows that the person go through, right? And have like some sort of a router that can route the user's query to the right workflow. And when somebody's processing passports, you obviously want it to be kind of controlled and high quality, that stuff, right? And the steps are usually the same. It's just that there are certain kind of like decision the person has to make at each of the sub steps. Then a workflow is probably best because you just pipe the output to the next node and then the next node process something and then pipe it to the next one. But if it's like let's say you want to replace the person entirely, and then the person one of the responsibility is to determine case by case whether or not to like you know deny or like accept a person's passport application, then maybe that's more of an agent kind of like system, where there are more rooms for interpretation in terms of like the input, and you can then as an agent you can then create a plan. I think for me at least it's all if there's like a sign of a plan that makes it an agent. If the plan has been heuristically coded into the workflow, then it's usually a workflow. But if it's like, no, on the fly, you look at the input and then you come up with a plan, that's usually an agent. So I think for me, I like to keep that mental model to everything that I look at in terms of like differentiating between like agents and like other things like workflows.
In regards to like the plan it makes, I feel that's where we start to lose people in terms of the fear of losing control to the AI, where all of a sudden you're letting this computer program run off on its own and do it. What are your strategies, techniques, advice around things like observability or being able to like rein it in and take control for someone to like graduate from a workflow to an agent? All of a sudden, there's so much more possibilities. So, what should they keep in mind when they're getting to that level?
For sure, yeah, I'll answer that question real quick. I also want to point out that not everything has to be an agent, right? Like a lot of things
Yeah.
in life should be a workflow because you
Mhm.
want that control over the quality. But if you really want to do an agent, my suggestion from, consulting for a bunch of different companies and working on my own project is that you should talk to the person who does the job and figure out how they do their job, how they're not just like the steps that they take to do the job, but like their thought process of like how do they come to the decision that they make. And agents usually, like we talked about how open-ended it is, it's probably better to build agents for jobs that are more creative or open-ended. Like, for example, we have an amazing use case of deep research, right? Like researching is kind of like quite open-ended. You kind of have to do investigative work and then you find information and then you investigate further based on those information. So definitely talk to the subject matter expert of the job that you're trying to replace, and then see how they make decisions. Bake that into the prompt of the agent, and that's the first step that you should do. And then over time, you can run that agent across several different tasks that the real person does, and then let the person decide whether or not the outputs of your agents are good. And then maybe you have a golden data set of like human annotated kind of like this is good, this is bad, I wouldn't do this myself, da da da. Then you can then iterate on the prompt, iterate on like what kind of information you put into the context window, and then that's how you make a better agent.
And I'd actually just pull it back a little bit because you mentioned like the job you want to replace. I think also framing it around having someone take control of their own job and being able to start enhancing themselves, augmenting themselves with these different agents and workflows, where you're able, as the content expert or content matter expert yourself, be able to say, okay, this is how I think about it. I can start implementing these processes, these pipelines in order to make my life easier or, 10x my output or whatever it is these days. But the ability to have a mental model of how you do your job and be able to just start taking incremental pieces of it and start automating it. What a lot of people find intimidating is words like we've been saying, automating, iterating, context. All of this just sounds like a lot, but really you can use an AI, an LLM, a chatbot to help you get this process started, where you can say, this is what I do every single day, and it takes 5 minutes of my day. If I spend 1 hour right now, in 2 months, and it can automate the job, in 2 months, all of a sudden I'm starting saving time, and then for everything there on in is compounding interest. So I think it's important to people take the mental model of, you don't just need to be an engineer trying to improve business processes. Like, you as an individual can make your life better in your professional life or personal life if you just start paying attention to the things that you do on a repeated basis in the digital realm, and then just chat with an AI about how to automate it.
I agree. Yeah, you put it perfectly.
You brought up deep research, so I wouldn't mind touching into that one a little bit, because I've used deep research, mixed results. It depends on the topic, depends on the service. Sometimes use Perplexity, sometimes OpenAI. But when does deep research work for you? What advice do you have? Should someone just go on and say, like, I want to learn about sunscreens and then just send it on its way? Or is there other nudges or context engineering that you can do to get better results?
For sure, yeah. So for deep research, so I don't know if you, so for people who are listening, deep research actually falls in the category of RAG. It actually falls in the category of RAG because it's retrieval. So we have, full text search, and then we have like vector search, semantic search, and stuff like that. And then we have like agentic search, and then the more beefy version of agentic search is actually deep research, which runs the agent for longer and does more research, and obviously more expensive to run.
There-
But for me, when I like, here's how I like to use Perplexity. For example, I'm trying to learn how to play the piano for the first time in my life. Uh, I'm 29. I never played the piano in my life, but whenever I go to a public space, I see somebody like banging out Interstellar theme, and I'm like, I'll be that person one day. That
Nice.
looks so cool. So what I do is I go on Perplexity and I ask for like, okay, in 2025, what are some of the best beginner friendly kind of like piano models, and what should a beginner look for? So for a traditional search query, it's actually quite difficult for me to like be able to remember all of my questions and be able to sequentially ask them in three different Google search tabs. So that's like a very convoluted question. So it's like I have to look at the list of like different models first and try to remember that I had to go and find out what should I be looking for, like what kind of features I should look for in each of these things. And sometimes I even look for stuff like what cases would fit my piano if I want to travel with it. Then I gotta do all these kinds of math. But if you type that whole thing into Perplexity, it'll just do it for you and do the math and do all of that for you step by step. So I think that's the beauty of deep research. And that's like a very light deep research as well, because Perplexity does kind of like two things, two ways of doing deep research. There's the research online and then answer your question, and then there's like research and then research and then research and then research and then write your report. That's the deep research that we were talking about. But at least for like a light search thing where it's a little bit agentic, um, it solves multiple questions for you in the same query. So you as a user, you can basically save like 5, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. And then for deep research, that's more in the realm of like, okay, I'm trying to do my job, and I need to write the report, or I need to do some like heavy, reading in a certain topic, and then synthesize the information, and then provide some sort of output. You can let AI do all that for you because AI reads really fast and synthesizes information incredibly well, and that's why I love deep research. And it's also one of those patterns that people realize that only not only works for web content but also like enterprise documents. That's why we have OpenAI. You can hook up to your company's database now, and you can do deep research of the entire enterprise kind of documentation corpus. Or like with Notion, you can do like this deep research mode where it will research across your entire Notion workspace, all your pages and database and stuff like that, and bring surface out like information that are relevant. So I think, at least from my perspective, going into 2025 or 2026 soon, deep research is one of those use cases that kind of came out on top and kind of like was actually providing value to like the regular users or like the casual business user, like an analyst, as opposed to something like autocomplete or write me a poem, that kind of deal where we had like ChatGPT like 2 years ago.
It's asynchronous too, so you don't have to be like constantly monitoring or babysitting it, which is really cool. Really quick, just on RAG, retrieval augmented generation. I still view it as just putting things into the context. And I want to know like if you feel differently, because I worry that a lot of people when they hear RAG or retrieval augmented generation, they think it's this overly complicated thing. And it really isn't, and it's really broad. Some people are like, oh, it's, using a vector database, doing that. And that's only a subset of it. Like even just querying a regular database still counts as RAG. Searching the web counts as RAG. What are your thoughts on that as either like a term or how you approach it?
So RAG falls under context engineering as well, because it's all about finding what is the most relevant for the LLM or the AI in the moment, and then put it in there and nothing else. So that's the retrieval part of RAG. So RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. I actually never know what augmented the A part stand for, but I know what generation is. It's the LLM part. It's the part where you have enough context and then you generate an output. But the retrieval part is where most people have issues with, right? And just like you said, querying from database and then retrieving information like rows and columns or JSON, stuffing it into the context of the LLM, it counts as RAG. It doesn't have to be vector databases. The vector database being like the only thing for RAG, I think is part of it is because of the marketing, uh, you know, from like vector databases companies for like the last 2 years, where it's like we are the memory for AI, or we are like RAG.
Yeah.
But you know, it could be it could be vector search, it could be graph database retrieval, Postgres. It could even be like you know an MD file, like how Claude kind of like has a memory file that is like a Claude MD file. Those things are always, it's whatever you store data in, and if you can retrieve just the right amount of data to bring back to generate something with LLM, that is considered RAG. And I want to add one more thing, which is that when people think about RAG, you should think about it as a search problem, not necessarily a vector database problem. So when you solve a search problem, there's a whole heaps of ways to solve that problem, right? You can either combine metadata filtering, you can combine, full text search, you can do vector database search for like more of a recommendations engine style kind of way, because it's very like fuzzy, right? Um, but yeah, like it's a search problem, and you should try search techniques as opposed to like trying different vector databases, because you probably won't get better results switching from Pinecone to Weaviate to Quadrant. You probably have better results changing up your techniques and see what are the top 20, 50 queries that people are asking, and then optimize to get those ones accurate all the time, and make sure that the context in your database has those information, rather than, messing around with different providers.
I'm glad you brought up the markdown file. That's one thing that I've been doing very consistently across almost all the tools I use. Whenever there's any long running task, you increase the likelihood of failure. But if you're able to shorten the length of conversation or interaction and have it kind of jumpstart from a checkpoint. So I have it go through a task, write a document to explain its current state and progress in that task, start a whole new conversation and say, review this file to understand the current state, and then proceed. You're able to take a larger corpus of information discovery of context, condense it and distill it, and then start fresh. And you have less chance of it going off the rails, being steered in the wrong direction. And it's one of those techniques that I feel we still have room to improve the way that it's done, but it works in the meantime. Do you have any strategies around how people can kind of improve the performance of one of these long running, like long horizon tasks?
Long horizon task. Yeah, definitely, like you said, like being able to plan and then save that somewhere, so that when you run it like an agent runs LLM in a loop, right? So like every step, it's kind of like pipe in whatever the result was from the last step plus the history of the conversation. So if in the history of the conversation, aka the context engineering, has information about the things it needs to do and what has been crossed off, that's great. Otherwise, your long running task at the end, it will forget what it was trying to do. That always happens, especially early days with like cursor agent, where it's like, and people had to force it to write down the plan on their markdown file before it goes and do its things. But like, this may be a good segue into Claude Code, because Claude Code does that automatically, right? Every time you ask it to do something, it'll be like, you can turn on this thing called plan mode, and it can, write a plan, and then you approve the plan, and then it'll be like, okay, here's my to-do list. And this to-do list is literally just like a tool for the agent to run. So the agent has It's required to run the to-do list task first, and then required to update that task list as it goes and does things. And I think that, part of the reason why I think you find that to be effective when you like force it to write a file, or maybe like Claude Code like writes a to-do list, is because LLMs has a tendency to like, kind of pay attention more on like the lower like towards the end of like the prompt. So like maybe like the to-do list is like it's been a couple of messages away in the past, it probably will forget about it. Then if it keeps like revisiting it, then it's fresh in the context, and then LMs will hopefully like look at that and be more aware of where it's at instead of being lost and be like, oh, I guess I'm done, even though that's like halfway through the to-do list.
One aspect of context engineering, or just managing context in general, RAG, if you will, is MCP, because it's starting to become accepted across the industry. More and more people are adopting it. Model context protocol. Some people don't understand why it's so important. Why can't we just use APIs like we have with traditional programming? What are your thoughts on MCP? What do you use it for? Any insight there?
Yeah, I used to be in the camp that didn't care until it became very popular. And usually when something becomes popular and became a standard, you should probably care, right? So I did the right thing and I did some research. And then I ended up building a few servers and doing a few things with it. But essentially, when people look up MCP, what they usually see is the definition on the documentation, the official documentation, which says MCP is like the USB-C for agents. Like, what does that mean? I don't think it helps the case at all. Um, but to me, MCP just means that hey, instead of hitting API endpoints, which are made for developers, we hit endpoints where it's an entire workflow, and it's described in a way that like an AI or an agent can consume, as opposed to like a granular thing like an endpoint. What do I mean by that is this, and the team at Blocks, the company that like the ex-founder of Twitter founded, I forgot what Jack Dorsey founded. They wrote a really good blog about the lessons learned building MCP, and one of the lessons is that don't make the MCP tools as granular as API endpoints, aka don't just turn all your API endpoints into MCP endpoints, because you want to encapsulate as many steps as possible into one MCP resource, and then let the agent use the resource as opposed to like hit multiple endpoints and make a sequential calls to your server to do something as if they are the developer trying to build integration. So MCP has two components to it, right? There's the server, there's the client. The client is usually, either your application, your product, or like something that you would use as an end user, like Cursor, Claude Code, ChatGPT, stuff like that. And inside of your client, I mean, I should probably call it host. The technical definition of it is that your application host. And inside of the host, there are multiple clients that can be connected to MCP servers. So we just mentioned one benefit of MCP server. I mean, using MCP in general is that it's now the de facto standard for like interoperability between different services. That has to do with AI. It can encapsulate entire workflows, and it's very friendly to an AI model or an agent to consume compared to granular API endpoints that an agent has to call multiple ones to get a task done. A task is usually multiple API calls to get done. Like you might have to read a user database and then read another table and then make an edit here, right? So it's like three calls from the agent. Instead, the lessons learned by a lot of teams here building MCP is that you should build MCP servers where there's a workflow, which is update user. You've hit it. Behind the scenes, the server does three API calls, and the workflow, as far as the agent know, is one endpoint or one resource that the agent can consume. So that's way better than like endpoints, because now it's more in the realm of like the business logic as opposed to like the developer world where it's like API endpoints, integration, and stuff like that. Too granular. So as another benefit of MCP is that as a developer, your job is no longer to build integrations better. That's the job of the integration provider now. Because if an integration provider builds a really good MCP server, hosted preferably, then people will have a better time using it. And because that team now owns the definition of the tools available on the MCP server. So to give a little bit of explanation. So when your agent, let's say your cursor agent or your product hits an MCP server, usually what it does is it does this little step that's we call discovery, where it's trying to see whether or not what kind of like resources is available on the MCP server. Could be a bunch of tools that the agent can use, could be prompts, could be files, it could be a whole bunch of stuff. An MCP server, by the way, can also ask your agent to do things. There's a whole bunch of different protocols that could happen. And of course, we have authentication and stuff like that as well. So you always, keep your processes secure. But after the discovery stage, the agent on your side, aka cursor agent or your product, will make a decision whether or not to call a resource or a tool from the MCP server. And then the MCP server does a thing, send back some resources, and that's it. So another going back to what I was saying earlier, your job as a product builder or an agent builder, you get a set of tools available to your agent without you building anything. You don't have to think about definition of the tool. You don't have to think about authentication. We kind of do, but not necessarily to the granularity as before. But because everything is on the MCP server side, the service provider is now taking over the performance of providing those tools for you. So no longer do you have to think about, oh, I need to integrate Google search, so I need to spend like a couple hours building the right tool with the right definition, arguments, explain those arguments to my agent. No, just call the MCP server because the team has built that and they probably built it better than you from day one because you just saw the documentation. They've been building this for a long time. So I think that's the right direction for the industry, which means, less work for you as a developer building products, standardized protocol everywhere, which is great. If you need something, you just hook it up. No need to spend a whole day building integrations. And yeah, MCP server is great. And they're always updating, which is pretty awesome. And I think that honestly, the biggest thing is that everyone's adopting it. That's why it's great. If nobody is adopting it, then the protocol is worthless, right? So I think that was probably the biggest thing.
Exactly. And it even adds value in small little efficiencies where one of my first use cases that I adopted MCP for was the GitHub integration, where I can be working in Cursor, going about, and I'm like, okay, done this issue. What's the next issue? Next highest priority issue. And then it's able to pull it in and just continue the chat. So I don't have to worry about switching over, losing context. It's not a huge deal, but it's one of those little things where it's such a small improvement that I wouldn't build a tool for it. I would just, manually
Exactly.
go
You
over.
wouldn't sit down and build that GitHub tool yourself. But given
Exactly.
this, you would use it and you understand the value of it right away. So MCP is actually a great lead gen for a lot of these like tech companies.
Could you give some elaboration?
Yeah, so let's say like there's a company called Tavili which does like web search, web scraping, all this good stuff. Um, you could spend like 10, 20 minutes trying to build like a Tavili integration to your product. Or you could try it out and just copy the URL from the hosted MCP server, paste into your, agent, like whatever your agent is, whatever the interface it has. And now all of a sudden, when you at runtime, it has access to like 20 more tools, all with right definitions, with the right arguments, probably fine-tuned the way so that it always works because whatever, errors other people have using the same MCP server, they probably would have tweaked it, you get the benefits. So I think it's just align the incentive the right way so that service providers are incentivized to, promote and maintain the MCP server so that you have a better experience, which you in turn don't have to do it. And you still, get the benefit of using the tool.
Hai's right. MCP is becoming more and more powerful and it's starting to proliferate everywhere. And if you want to use MCP in your real workflows, you have to use real data, and that can be kind of scary. So that's why I've been using ToolHive. ToolHive makes it simple and secure to use MCP. It includes a registry of trusted MCP servers. It lets me containerize any other server with a single command. I can install in a client in seconds, and secret protection and network isolation are built in. You can try ToolHive as well. It's free and it's open source, and learn more at toolhive.dev. Now back to the conversation with Hai. I would like to dive a little bit more into Claude Code. We've had an episode where we did an advanced version of it, and I find anything in the terminal is inherently intimidating for people who aren't used to working in the terminal. I still remember back when I was at school for CS and the first real interaction with the terminal, like, oh, wow, I feel like I have such superpowers because you're engaging with the computer on such a deep level. But for people who don't have that same experience, it's the little black box with just a blinking cursor and it can do absolutely everything, but you don't really understand how. Claude Code has been one of the most like widely accepted coding tools and is starting to like integrate into other things. For example, I use an Obsidian. I'd love to know how you use Claude Code. If someone's brand new to it and they're not really comfortable with the terminal, what they can do to kind of gain that confidence to use it, because it's such a valuable tool that I really want more people to give it a try.
For sure, yeah. My advice is that you can treat it as ChatGPT. That's why it's not, you know, intimidating at all. Like if you don't know something, you can literally ask it. Like, what can I do? And Claude Code has context of what Claude Code can do. Like Claude Code knows what Claude Code rules files means, like Claude.md means. So you can literally ask it, like, what can I do with you? And like, can you help me do this and that? Um, it can also help you like navigate the terminal as well. If you run it either in interactive mode, which is just type Claude, terminal spins up like a nice orange terminal interface, or you run it headless, which is, yeah, I think you just type -p and then it'll just not spin up the interactive interface and just like run it in your terminal by itself. But yeah, I agree. Like when I was first learning how to code, the terminal is probably the most intimidating thing that I ever seen in my life. Like I always like was so scared of typing in the wrong commands from like tutorials that if I type in the wrong thing, I know I had to delete the whole thing and start over because I have no idea what I did. And all these like locks just like stream out on the screen drives me nuts. But on the market, there's this thing called there's a tool called Warp that is kind of like the AI terminal as well. So you don't have to remember any commands for your terminal to work. You can just type in natural language; it'll just do it for you. So I think the yeah. So me and my friend had a conversation the other day about why people like Claude Code, even though it's in the CLI, and this plays really well into this tweet that I saw recently from Swix as well, which he says like there are people who are using Claude Code to automate like go to market or marketing like automations. And I'm like, what? Like Claude Code? But I think for me personally, so for me, I use Cursor 24/7 for the whole year of 2024. And once I switched to Claude Code, I couldn't explain it at first, but I when I use Claude Code, I code more. When I say code more, I mean like probably prompt more or like work more. And I don't feel as drained at the end of the day. And I think the other day I realized why, which is that when you're looking at Claude Code, you're looking at one thing, like your terminal. You're not typing in something on the right and then you're doing something right away on the left with your file and blah blah blah. So you're not stressed out. Claude Code, you give it a task and you just have to sit there and wait, or you spin up another one. But it's not super dopaminergic where it's like you have so many things going on. For Cursor, for example, it's almost like a co-pilot UX, right? You have stuff on the side, and your real stuff is in the middle. So you're thinking really hard on like the prompting stuff on the side, but then you switch right back into looking at your file, and you keep like grinding away. So for me personally, I enjoy using Claude Code a lot because it brings me joy, and the little animation kind of like keeps me going as well. So I don't know about you, but that's how I feel about it.
Nice. Yeah, I like it. I still use Cursor a fair bit. I would say I'm a pretty even split, but along the same lines of your justification, where if I want to fire and forget, give it a task to create an artifact, or like more recently in my Obsidian Vault, I've been having it create dashboards for me to combine with data view, incredibly powerful. So you can just have it start going through all your notes and starting to find patterns and be able to elevate up the things that you care about, create a little dashboard. It's nifty. I love it. And I can have that going. Meanwhile, with my day job, I'll be using Cursor because I do like to read and audit and make sure that the code is up to a certain standard. And it's almost like the difference between me being the code checker, like the proofreader, versus just having my little assistant buddy go off and do a task for me. But I've heard other people who along the lines of you just like completely migrate over one way or the other. And even the people who think Cursor is too opinionated with the way they do indexing stuff, they'll use VS Code with a plugin like Root Code, Augment Code. There's AMP. There's a bunch of different ones that you can kind of plug into it. So what's awesome is just how many different options there are for people to kind of find their own flavor, see what works best with them. And I think that just goes back to people needing to just play, explore, have fun with it, see what works. You might fall in love with the first thing you use. You might not. For example, you brought up Warp. I tried Warp. I didn't like the way it was outputting, and probably just because I'm more of a terminal purist. So I end up making my own tool with the help of AI, where in the terminal, if I just type AI space and then any natural language query I want, it'll generate the terminal syntax for that. So I can be like, check on my Docker container or something. It'll be like Docker PS. And then it's just, it allows me to not have to memorize syntax, but I still get the capability. But for people who don't want to make their own thing, we have tools like Warp they can download. And I think there's one called Wave that's open source. Doesn't quite have the same polish as Warp. I think Warp got a massive underground lately too. So I think it just comes back to people should experiment and figure out what works best with them, but have the courage to just try new things. Because like we said with the terminal, it can be intimidating because you don't really know, but just get Claude or ChatGPT running and just ask it questions and they can help you guide you through the process. Are there any other tools along those lines where people might find them intimidating, but you find them useful and you kind of just have to experience it for yourself to get into it?
So recently, I've dived pretty deep into the whole like CLI terminal agent coding agents,
Nice.
and there's a whole bunch of them. There's like Gemini CLI, right? There's like OpenAI Codex. There's Quen Code, which is a fork of Gemini. They look the same, and there's like Cursor CLI, which is actually pretty cool, but nothing is as polished as Claude Code. But another thing that I'm really interested in for these kinds of agents that are in the terminal is that they are built, whether or not on purpose, to fit inside of like existing automation workflows. Because, for example, we talked earlier today about Claude Code having this thing called Claude Code SDK, where it can run without the interactive mode and just kind of like be a node inside of your GitHub action or your Bash script or even your product, as some of the companies that I work with here actually does. And Cursor CLI also does the same thing, where it has a headless mode and it just run in the background. So I don't know about you, but I personally was very curious about this, so I went and built a couple different projects. One of them is called CLI on the cloud. Essentially, what it does is it's a Next.js app. You click on a button, you can create a sandbox, you can install Claude Code on the sandbox, and then you can chat with it. And then on the surface, it looks like ChatGPT, but it's actually Claude Code running on the sandbox, talking back to you. So it's very expensive.
Yeah.
It's way more expensive than talking to like a chatbot. But the sandbox has internet, it has everything. It's gonna say food and water. It has like all the tools, and you can give it basically you can tell it even simple stuff, but also very complex stuff like deep research. But you have to wait for a while. It'll run in a loop and it'll give you a final answer at the end. But there's an entity that's running on the sandbox, not in your computer, right? So you can think of the possibilities of like, okay, not just one Claude Code, but 10 of them, 100 of them running simultaneously in different sandboxes, doing different things. So now all of a sudden you have like almost like an army of agents. So I think my dream back then was to build something that is super close to Devin, which is like the AI software engineer that you talk to on Slack. I wanted to build something that's like that, and now like the technologies and the services are so available that we can build that so easily with state of the art kind of like agentic workflows and agents and sandbox that takes like 3 lines of code to spin up. So yeah, like Cursor CLI probably like another one that I use sometimes to use GPT-5, because with Claude Code you have to use anthropic models. If you're not into that, you have to use a different tool essentially.
And just in the note of CLIs, I still think back to the open interpreter days and how that was initial like computer use. Like that was one of the first ones that did proper computer use, and it was all CLI and incredibly expensive at times because it can go off the rails and steer you down a wrong path. But it's just really interesting that we're giving these systems powerful tools to be able to accomplish certain tasks, which brings it back to the whole agent conversation. But along the same veins, I'm kind of curious your thoughts on browser use agents, because having something that runs locally on your machine, can do tasks, write code, execute code, opens up a ton of possibilities. But one of the massive benefits of computers is the internet. So being able to not just query the internet, but browse, interact with the internet in the same way that humans do, similar to the reason humanoid robotics are going to be successful, because the modern world was designed for the human body. So humanoid robots can kind of just like plug and play in, at least during this transition period before we get a lot more robust API setups and whatnot. We're going to be having these browser use agents go. So do you want to touch on that a little bit? Have you used any that you like? Are there some promise there? Do you think it is just going to be like a transition tech, or do you think it's going to be something that sticks around for a while?
So agents running in like an environment is kind of like one of my most like curious topic. So there are agents running in Minecraft, right? Agents running in using computer, like like OpenAI's computer use. Back in the day, we had Open Interpreter and browser use agents, which I think are phenomenal. So I teach a bootcamp on Maven, and what I've been doing in the past month or so is building an open source project where I can use it to grade my students' homeworks. So right now, what it can do already is it can take in a list of projects submissions from my students from Notion, and then deploy one sandbox, and then just clone 50 of those into that same sandbox. And then I would run like a utility function through each repo to concatenate all the files together into one big string. And then I would just pipe that to an LLM to be like, hey, here's the entire repo. Give this person feedbacks based on what I would normally say. For example, if they're using Python, they'll write requirements.txt, use something like, UV, stuff like that. So that would do like the first pass of grading for me. And it works out great, actually. And I can also deploy an agent in that sandbox to kind of like roam around and do certain things, which is pretty cool. Uh, so the next thing I'm doing right now is actually take it to the next level, which is sometimes students deploy application on the web. So Vercel, whatever, right? Their application is live on the web. I can go and try it. Every time I try it, it takes me like 5 minutes. But what I can do is I can create a headless browser, go to that website, and then use a browser use agent to, based on the instructions that the student gave on how to use their app, actually try it and see if it works. So I just merged this first PR today on stream, where I added this service called BrowserBase and a browser control framework called Stagehand, which is also built by Paul Klein and the team at BrowserBase. So what we can do now is we can grade the student's code, and then we can also grade the student's output, which is their final project deployed on whatever service that is online. As if I'm looking at the project. Obviously, I'm still looking at them, but I'm just really happy that there's an agent out there that can go to the student's homework, click around, and tell me if, oh, this project is broken. It promised me that if I click on this, I can sign up, but I couldn't. So now I know that piece of information. I can go in and investigate with the student much faster. So I think browser use agent has obviously more capabilities and use cases than just somebody like me trying to grade coding assignments. For example, web scraping. So web scraping traditionally used to be like an automated thing, and you have to worry about proxies and IP and stuff like that. But you also have to worry about like where to click on the screen, um, how often, like how do you like move the cursor a certain way so you don't get detected by bots. Obviously, this kind of stuff is like falls into like this gray area of like, are you trying too hard and trying to look like human? Are you trying to skirt around certain rules and the regulations? But on the technology side of things, I think that being able to give the agent the full context of the website, not necessarily the DOM tree of the website, is so valuable because it can make decisions on like how to use it. Because otherwise, you as a person, if you you cannot just Google search your way through a website, right? You have to look at the website and then figure out what buttons to click on because websites are built for humans. So I think browser use agent really helps with processes or tasks that require an agent to interact with this web world that was traditionally built for humans and very visual, very GUI heavy. Yeah, so if we can nail browser use agent, there could be a world where we don't need as many APIs anymore because to a human, the website, the landing page is the API for the human, right? If we can use that just like a human, then we don't need, an API for every single service out there. So that's my 2 cents.
What do you think would be the use of these browser agents for someone in their day-to-day life? Say they are working a desk job and they don't feel comfortable going as deep as like writing a program or something, but they're like, I do this same task every single day. I need a tool to help solve this. When what under what situations is the browser use agent the right tool for that job?
I think the browser use agent is the right tool for every single job. Well, that's for the most jobs out there, right? The reason why we can't just have ChatGPT do everything for us is because there are only so many tools that they give the agent, and each of those tools requires a partnership to get like an API endpoint going. But with an interface that is available, because like no humans is barred from using the web, but AI is barred from using the web everywhere, like programmatically, right? If you want permission to use something, you need to ask for it. You got to go through all these things to build integration and stuff like that. But humans aren't like that. If you want to go and look up a database from your government, like you just go and look it up and you scroll around and you get the data out. As an AI, you unless there's a public API endpoint for it, you probably will have a hard time getting all the data out in a clean way. So if let's just imagine like one day you be working, on something, and then you realize that you have to book your tickets to go to Greece or something. Right now, today, you go on ChatGPT, you can ask it to do it, but it'll ask you all kinds of questions of like, oh, can you give me permission to do this? And you can also like, which website do I go to? I only have access to like TripAdvisor and like some other service because that's all the services I'm allowed to use. But for a browser use agent, it would just maybe hit up Google first, see whatever is the cheapest, and it just keep going and keep going. Whatever website you can hit, just like, as like a person, there's nothing stopping it, so it can complete a lot of tasks for you seamlessly. I don't know if we're there yet, but I think that's where most people thinking heading towards, because we saw that OpenAI launched I forget what it's called, but it's like computer use, kind of like agent thing in ChatGPT, where it's like you give it a task, it actually spin up a sandbox with a computer or a browser, and then you can see the agent like doing stuff on the browser or the screen with like thinking notes and all that stuff, and you can leave that and go do something else. And browser use just allows the agent to do more, way more than like our regular kind of React agent where you're given tools and the tools have to be built a certain way. Like the world is in our internet, which is accessible through browser, and if the AI can use the browser properly, it can have access to pretty much everything. And I learned something new this morning as well. A little thing that I noticed. When I use Browser Base, which is the service that you can use to spin up these headless browser environment for agents, you can watch the session where the agent is tinkering with the website and clicking around, scrolling around. And it's not like a stream of like a video stream either. They're actually streaming the DOM tree of the website out from their sandbox to their front end. That's why everything looks so clean and 4K in real time. And I'm like sitting there, I'm like, is this using a lot of my bandwidth? Because it looks 4K. Like I don't believe it. But it turns out that it reconstructed the entire browser in your little iframe on your browser to see what the agent is looking at and doing from all the HTML from the original website that the agent is on right now. And that's why it looks so clean in real time. And I think when you try it, you'll know, because the world just opens up. There's so many possibilities, right? Grading homework is one thing, but like you just spin off one to be like, okay, go like somebody give you their website and be like, um, tell me about this customer. Like you can tell your browser agent to go and click around and just find out. Like it's pretty great. So yeah, I think this technology is going to go really far, and I think very soon, a lot of the products that we use will have some sort of like, oh, we're gonna spin up the sandbox, we're gonna drop an agent in there because now the agent can be let loose and like use the computer. I think that's where we're heading.
One thing I want to make sure we touch on before I run out of time, you actually brought this to my attention. Since we've been talking so much about agents, you brought up the idea of a deep agent. And I actually hadn't heard the difference between a shallow agent and a deep agent. I'd always heard of just the different, almost like verticals or specialities of different agents. Could you just tell us quickly what makes an agent a deep agent and why people should care about that?
Harrison Chase from LangChain has a knack for coining things very nicely. So I think he coined the term deep agent, and essentially deep agents are just your regular agents, but run for like 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, a full day, or even longer. And we've seen in the past that there are benchmarks where big AI labs would run their models for like hours or days, and then the score went up because it was able to like fix itself and think for longer, use more reasoning tokens, etc. So deep agents came from the world of coding agent and deep research agents. because those two things run very long. When deep research on OpenAI came out on ChatGPT first time, people were running for like 20 minutes, and the results were great. Like it's actually a good report, right? And stuff like software engineer on software, the AI software engineer that replaced the entire like software engineer, like Devin, where you can only talk to on Slack. Those things run in Sandbox and they run forever. Like, and it costs a lot of money too, as you would imagine. But the trade off there is that money, but also you get a lot better and more in depth output because it was able to do more, like a lot more, and checks itself a lot more. So deep agent essentially just means it runs a long time and it usually plan. It always has to plan because if you don't plan and you try to run for an hour, you'll be lost, right? So there's going back to like the whole, like to-do list and Claude Code and all these patterns. Agents that plan has a bunch of like access to a bunch of things and run for a very long time equals deep agent equals very in-depth and high value output. I think I have to stress this part, high value output. It's almost like you work an hour, you produce something of value to the company. This is kind of like that. It's like you run this for a long time and the output's no longer just, a file of code change. Like when you do a one-off thing on Cursor, it's like a whole PR and, a whole set of features being built or like a whole code base refactored. Or like, again, like going back to the more businessy use cases, like a deep research report. So these things, again, runs long and high value output. So yeah, I think this is like we're getting closer to replacing people because now it's running longer. I feel like these models, these tools running like a one-off thing where we send a message in, we get something out, still makes them feel like kind of like, fake, kind of like robots. But like if you just run something in the background and it's providing value in the economy, that sounds like a person. Like there are millions of people working right now that we don't know, but then we get the benefit of their work, right? And we don't have to trigger them. I mean, obviously they have to be motivated to go to work, but we we don't know that they're working right now, and like we don't have to like keep pinging them that hey, like start working on the next thing, because they are already on the next thing. So it's very close to like being replacing like people, which is both exciting and it's terrifying at the same time.
Hi, this was a ton of fun. I am thrilled for your upcoming Maven course. Could you please tell the audience a little bit about it and anything else that they should be aware of and keep up with you?
Absolutely, thank you. So me and my friend Mary, we have been teaching over 150 people on how to use like different AI tools to ship products faster, AI products, so like agentic workflows, agents, all that stuff. And we teach people these concepts, so like context engineering, deep research, MCP, Claude Code, browser use agent, deep agent, and many more things. For example, evals. And our next cohort is gonna be September 14th. So September 14th to like the end of October, so like 6 weeks, and it's very intensive. I'll be live streaming every day, and you get access to me. So I will talk your ears off about these things because I can't help myself when I'm like, curious about a certain topic. So yeah, so it's gonna be about 50 people, pretty limited seats, but we're on Maven, and for the first time, so shout out to the Maven team for like, chasing us for the longest time, and then we're finally on it, and we love the platform. But yeah, so like if you're looking for a community of people using AI tools and also like building products fast, our goal is for you to go from oh, I don't know if I could build this to like, oh, I could build this and everything I can think of by the end of the bootcamp. So yeah, that's our mission.
Thank you for listening to this conversation with Hai Nghiem. I really hope that you were able to pick up some more of the fundamentals and approaching AI toolings a little bit less intimidating. If there's anything else you want to learn about it, please let me know. I want to make sure that everyone watching is able to leverage tooling to the full capacity so we can really start accelerating together. I've really enjoyed having Hai on. Ever since I met him at AI Tinkers Ottawa, we always have a great conversation, and he teaches me something new, so I want to try to bring that to you. I want to give a quick shout out to ToolHive for supporting the show so I could have conversations like this, and I'll see you next week.